what's going on here is that the food industry has figured out that there's a combination of sweet, carbohydrate, and salt that goes to our brains and is very, I think it's addictive. Now, that's my opinion.
All right, we're going to get right into it. This video is going to be a little bit long, but I'm going to lay out some really good evidence for you guys because right now, Biden's FDA chief is getting grilled on Capitol Hill in a Senate hearing over artificial dyes, obesity, and the diabetes crisis in the corrupt food industry. I find it kind of interesting that up until this moment, and Robert Kennedy Jr. was coming on deck, no one cared. No one cared. And as they forced those biochemicals into your body to get you to get a paycheck, no one cared. But now all of a sudden people care. And here's Bernie Sanders, the socialist. The socialist, Bernie Sanders, is standing up for you. Roll the tape.
If there is a mantra that exists in this committee, I think on both sides of the aisle, is that an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure. And that is going to be what we'll be discussing today. In America, it is no secret to anybody that we have a major obesity epidemic as well as an epidemic in diabetes. They are both directly related, and they are both getting worse. More than 35 million Americans have type 2 diabetes, over 10% of our population, 10% of our population, and about 90% of those with type 2 diabetes are obese. Diabetes is not only a serious illness unto itself, but it is a contributing factor to heart disease, stroke, amputations, blindness, and kidney failure. And the cost of treating these illnesses is staggering. According to the American Diabetes Association, the total cost of diabetes in the United States was nearly $413 billion. $413 billion, up 27% over the past 6 years. This amounts to about 10% of our total health care expenditures. That is an unbelievable and unsustainable amount of money. And when we talk about the type 2 diabetes epidemic and the huge increase in new cases, we must also talk about the epidemic of obesity in our country. Some 90% of people with type 2 diabetes are overweight or obese. These two epidemics go hand in hand. The time is long overdue for us to pose some very simple questions.
And now he goes on to say that it's the corruption in the food and beverage industry that's doing this.
How did it happen that according to the CDC, the rate of childhood obesity in America has tripled since the 1970s and has gotten so bad that 1 out of every 5 children in our country is now obese? How has it happened that over 40% of adults in the United States today are obese? And in my view, the answers to these questions are not very complicated. For decades, Congress and the FDA have allowed large corporations to make huge profits by enticing children and adults to consume ultra-processed food and beverages loaded up with sugar, salt, and saturated fat. There is growing evidence, including testimony that we have heard right here in this committee, that these foods are deliberately designed to be addictive, similar to cigarettes and alcohol, and lead to a higher rate of type 2 diabetes. Shockingly, according to a study published in the British Medical Journal, ultra-processed foods make up an incredible 73% of our nation's food supply. Bottom line, much of the food that we as Americans are now consuming are making us unhealthy and are contributing to the fact that our life expectancy is significantly lower than that of many other wealthy countries. None of this is happening by accident. The food and beverage industry is spending $14 billion a year on advertising to push these unhealthy products onto the American consumer. Even worse, and really unacceptable. $2 billion of this money is spent to directly advertise these unhealthy products to our children in order to get them hooked on these foods at an early age. According to the Rudd Center for Food Policy and Obesity, children and teens view about 4,000 food and beverage ads on television each year, an average of 10 advertisements per day. Last year, for example, Coca-Cola spent $327 million on advertising in the United States alone, while it raked in more than $9.5 billion in profits. Not one of these ads will tell you that a 20-ounce bottle of Coke contains more than 15 teaspoons of sugar. 15 teaspoons of sugar, over twice the recommended daily limit for kids. Not one of these ads will tell you that drinking 1 can of Coke a day could increase your chance of getting type 2 diabetes by up to 26%. Given this reality, which has been widely discussed by scientists and doctors for decades, this really is not new news.
Now you're going to love this part. This is where Bernie Sanders says that the FDA has basically done nothing to address all of these ailments. And Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden and all these people, they've been in these offices for a long time. So it's kind of funny to watch him act like he has clean hands.
The question then arises, what has the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, done to address these epidemics which have impacted the health of millions of Americans and cost us hundreds of billions of dollars each year? As far as I can tell, the answer is not much. Way back in 2010, the National Academy of Medicine recommended that the food and beverage industry be required to put nutrition labels on the front of their products that the American people could easily understand. That was in 2010. On June 13th, 2023, the FDA announced that it would propose a rule to require the food and beverage industry to put nutrition labels on the front of their products no later than October of 2023. The FDA missed that deadline.
Because it is his job and the other members of Congress to monitor the FDA and all these other agencies. It's their job to keep them from going rogue and to make sure they're doing their work. It's Senator Tommy Tuberville, and he's going to basically get them to admit that they haven't done any testing on the dyes in our food in at least a decade.
I want to ask you about Red 3 and Red 40, both of you, and get your comments on this. It's not a conservative or a liberal standpoint. I think we all need to understand as a group about how we've gotten to this point. The FDA has a position that food coloring like 40 are safe for kids' ingestion. Do both of you stand behind that, Dr. Caleb?
I'm going to refer that to Mr. Jones.
Okay.
We have not evaluated Red 40 in over a decade. Over a decade ago,
We have not.
At FDA we have not evaluated the safety of Red 40 in over a decade. So over a decade, that was the conclusion that FDA made.
But we have evaluated. We are in the process of evaluating Red 3, and you may want to comment on that.
Well,
right.
let me say this. Red 3 has been known to cause cancer in cosmetics, but we still allow it to be put in our food. I don't understand that. Go ahead.
So Red 3, we have a petition in front of us to revoke the authorization for it, and we are hopeful that within the next few weeks we will be acting on that petition, and a decision should be forthcoming.
Tell us that process. How does that work? The timeline, if we know something's deadly for anybody that ingests it, how do we continue to just study that and not say, hey, enough's enough?
So Red 3 presents an interesting example for us. It is actually known to be cancer in laboratory animals, rats, but the scientific consensus is that the mechanism of carcinogenicity in rats is not applicable in humans. However, under the FFDCA, which is the law that we implement, any chemical that is shown to be carcinogenic in animals or humans, or should I say humans or animals, cannot be authorized by FDA. It's called the Delaney Clause. And so even though we don't believe there is a risk to humans under the Delaney Clause of the FFDCA, red dye, because it is known to cause cancer in laboratory animals, should not be authorized. And so that is what has been challenged FDA for many years, is how to manage around the Delaney clause, where you have a scenario where, although there may be cancer evidence in animals, there is also evidence that is not harmful to humans.
Now this is where they get into the weeds a little bit about the SNAP program, because they provide food for folks, and then basically they're providing them bad food. So that in turn is making them sick, which in turn gets them back into the Medicare, Medicaid, which in turn gets them back into the big pharma, which in turn gets...
How about programs like SNAP benefits? A lot of SNAP benefits are used for very unhealthy foods. Do other nations that have supplemental food programs like SNAP benefits?
I can't honestly say I know about exactly what the other nations do here, but I know that this is a USDA program, as you well know. It's vitally important. We have so many children in the U.S. who can't afford their own, their parents can't afford their own diet. And I know there was a battle over this issue last time around. It would be one of the most important things, I think, that could be done. Here, the U.S. government has the purchasing power. So why not purchase healthy food?
And what we're going to show you right now is where Bernie Sanders actually admits that this is the most important part of the hearing. You guys are going to hear the chief lay it out.
What's going on here is that the food industry has figured out that there's a combination of sweet, carbohydrate, and salt that goes to our brains and is very, I think it's addictive. Now, that's my opinion. And I think it's the same neural circuits that are involved in opioid addiction and other kinds of addiction that we have. And they've studied this. Again, we don't have access to their research data like we do in the human medical products arena. And so if you're a person without much financial means and you're walking into a grocery store and the inexpensive ultra-processed food is half the cost of the fruits and vegetables, and it's carefully configured to really hit that brain. The way to think about this, have you ever tried to eat one potato chip? It's almost impossible. So there's a reason for this. And there's a lot more research that needs to be done, because we couldn't uncover the addiction circuits until the GLP-1s came along, because what they're doing is actually interfering with this circuit between the gut and the brain that tells you eat more. And there are actually 3 or 4 pathways involved here that are really fascinating that we're going to learn a lot more about. But here's a way to think about it. The food is probably addictive. And again,
engineered to be addictive.
This is not an FDA policy. This is my opinion, having looked at it.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Let me just take a moment before Senator Braun goes. You just said the most important point of the hearing. You said that the food industry is producing products which are unhealthy and addictive. And the question, of course, is that's exactly what's going on. What the hell have we done about it over the last 15 years?
They're about to wrap this hearing up, and Senator Ed Markey says,
what we cannot do is sign off on nominees who would be a danger to the public health. And that is what my concern is as we move into the new year. And the nomination of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. raises all of those questions, which the next Congress is going to have to deal with. So let me, with that, Mr. Chairman, yield back.
Thank you very much. Let me kind of summarize my sense of where we are. Number one, I'm not quite sure that the urgency of the issue has been made as apparent as it should be, but we are dealing with an extraordinary crisis. When 1 out of 5 of our kids is obese, when millions of people are struggling with diabetes, when we spend, according to the American Diabetes Association, over $400 billion a year treating diabetes and other related illnesses, we have a major crisis.
There you guys have it, right from the mouth of babes. This is happening in Congress right now, and I find it very interesting that just on the thought that Robert Kennedy Jr. was coming in to clean up stuff, all of a sudden now all this stuff is out in the public square. For the last decade or more, the FDA hasn't given nothing to care about us or our health. They just green light everything so they can get the money. All right, share this video with your friends. Please share this video with your friends so everyone can, we can understand that the food is making us sick and it's all by design, and we can keep putting pressure on them to get it fixed. We'll see you guys on the next video. This was video number 11. We're doing videos every single day, even tomorrow. So I'll see you guys then, okay? This was very eye-opening. And there's more to come. Trust me. And they all know it. And they're scared.
Did you guys know that in the 16, 17, and 1800s, chocolate was consumed as a beverage? There was no such thing as a chocolate candy bar. Well, we're bringing chocolate tea back to the 21st century because it's loaded with antioxidants our body loves, and it's a great source of magnesium that's wonderful for bone and heart health. It's a great addition to your coffee machine or your French press, or just along with your favorite sweetener. You can find it on offgridwithdouganstacy.com, along with our brand new tea infuser, simple to use for easy steeping. Cheers!